Sharma ji, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. How are
Good
you?
afternoon, sir.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
So welcome back to our show after a long time.
Thank you. Thank you, please. Yes, please. I'm ready. You can ask me to start. Let us start.
Let us start the meeting. I have some questions.
Yeah.
All very known and simple questions. The first question I would like to ask you is that the central government had announced a big package of 5 lakh crore for the infrastructure. So how much this would help the steel industry alone? Because they have announced, but we don't see much movement so far.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak to your very esteemed channel. So the question is very correct. The stimulus packages which are declared by Government of India, the similar packages have been declared worldwide. Today, if we see the entire world, the 5 big economies, and we calculate and compute that what is the total stimulus package declared by all these 5 economies. So that is about $17 trillion. This is including recent $5 trillion by United States. So in this particular scenario, what is happening? The entire world is moving towards the infrastructure growth. As you know, the steel industry and as well as cement industry, building construction industry, they are mainly dependent on the government support projects. If government starts building dams, government starts building railways, network, airports, water pipelines, the transmission towers, the shipbuilding industry, the warships. So then all of a sudden, the steel consumption also increases. Domestic housing alone, the steel consumption is very less. If you see, only 30% steel is being used by the common people and 70% comes to the projects. So 30% means the household appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, motorcycles, air conditioners, roofing sheets, the construction of construction bars or rebars for the independent houses or for the multi-story buildings. So that is only 30%. The 70% still goes in the projects which are supported by government, any government in the world. So be it railways, be it bridges, be it roads, be it dams, be it power transmission, be it port authorities, port development, shipbuilding, warships. So these all, the entire value chain that creates business for steel industry. So we feel that out of this 5.5 lakh crore of the total investment, at least 1.2 lakh crore should come to steel industry, and rest all will be to the other industries. So far, so good. I think things are moving in the right direction. Yes, we had wave 2 of COVID, and because of COVID wave 2, there's a little sluggishness. But if everything goes well, then surely the all projects which are declared by Government of India will pick up the pace in due course of time.
But in spite of the COVID too, we can see that there is a steep rise in the steel prices and also in the raw material.
As I told you, because it is not steel. Yeah, please complete your question.
I'm saying that in spite of the second wave, the steel prices have still gone up. And most of them say that is a strong demand for steel globally. And the global prices are even higher than the Indian prices. So how come when the market has slowed down so much and the steel prices have gone up quite a bit, almost 20%, and the automobile sector has gone down? Why this disparity is there?
Yeah, I got your question. You see, we have to see the geopolitical situation today. When we say that we are part of world economy, that means we are not isolated. We are affected positively or negatively, either favorably or adversely with the international scenario. So when we have around $17 trillion of the total stimulus packages worldwide, that means the world is consuming a lot of steel and the other consumables. When you start consuming steel, that means more steel consumption means more transportation, more ship load on shipping, more load on the raw materials, more load on the iron ore, pig iron, GPI, the uh, uh, pellets, and also the DRI. So when all these metallics, they start uh, increasing the prices and they go on a different kind of level, then automatically the steel prices, they also go up. Like NMDC has increased prices, I think, by 300 or 400% in the last 8 months' time. Similarly, the other merchant miners in the country, they also increase even up to 800%. I mean, the iron ore, which used to be fine, which used to be at 1,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees per ton, these fines are being sold at 8 to 9,000 rupees per ton today. The lumps are being sold at 15,000 rupees per ton today. So pellets are at a price of 15,500 to 16,000 rupees per ton today. So there is a steep increase in the raw material prices. And this increase is primarily because the consumption has increased. The steel prices in America has reached to $1,700 to $1,800 per ton, which is very unusual and unheard. Similarly, the prices in Europe are about $1,100 a ton. Prices in Middle East is about $1,020 to $1,050 a ton. In India, of course, you are right, the prices are only $800 or maybe $750 a ton. So Indian steel prices are lower, at least by 15 to 20% than the export prices. So export market is a spot market. That's why we feel that at JSPL, I'm telling that we should maintain our customer base. We should maintain the MSMEs customer. We should maintain the long-term customers of ours. And we are servicing them at a price which is affordable to them. And at that price, they cannot import as well. So this is the price which is under $50 to $200 a ton lower than the international spot prices. So different companies have different pricing policies, but our policy is to maintain the delta in this particular time and service the domestic customers as well as export customers. So we in spot market in 5% and 65% we are selling the domestic market as of now. So coming back on despite of COVID, how the prices have gone up, it is not only the COVID in India. The prices have gone up because the international prices have gone up. So today America is the driver. America is pulling a lot of steel and the metallics basically, right from pig iron to iron ore to pellets and DRI, HBI. So similarly, China is also consuming a lot of metallics and the semi-finished steel. And the reason behind this is geopolitical situation after the pressure what some countries led by China, they put up on China. The countries, the countries led by United States, they put up the pressure on China, and that has strained the relation in between China and Australia. And China stopped buying coking coal and also stopped buying iron ore. So then, all of a sudden, the iron ore in the rest of the world has become very expensive. So China started buying more and more from Brazil. So when the demand and supply disturbed, Brazil also increased the prices. And it is followed by the other multinational companies. Then nobody leaves the opportunity, and everybody increases the price. So is the NMDC in India, OMC, NMDC, merchant miners, and some other miners in the country. They also increase their prices. The prices are not similar to the prices which are landed in China or rest of the world, but they are still very high. So as I told you, the increase is about 300 to 500%, so which is very high. So today, the prices are driven by the international economy, not by Indian economy. So in India, yes, there is a depression in last 1 week time. I would say after the the cyclone which came in Bay of Bengal and the east coast of India. So the market has gone down, and that has also uh, 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 led to a less demand in the country. And COVID also has put up the second wave of COVID has also put up most of these states into lockdown condition, and the civil construction has gone down. But fortunately, MSMEs and the major steel industries are doing well, and they will come back very fast. Automobile is yet to pick up. I think maybe it will take about a month or 1.5 month time, maybe 8 weeks to pick up the pace.
You see this political standoff between India and China. How much India is affected due to this political?
You see, there are two regions. China is having problem with many countries at a time. China is having problem with India. China is having problem with other Southeast Asian countries, including Philippines, including Vietnam and Malaysia, and also Burma and Thailand, or many more countries. So they have their own style of working. I cannot comment on them. They have problem with Japan. They have problem with Australia. They have problem with America. So they have problem in many of the countries in Europe. So it is up to the Chinese government and their think tank to see whether they want to keep the relations strained, or they want to adopt the policy live and let live. So I think China will understand this maybe in next 6 months to 1 year time, and their policymakers will find out the way how to gel with the world. And if they don't gel with the world, then it will be very difficult for China also to remain as one of the leading economies in the world. So each and every economy is a big flywheel. So it takes a lot of time to ramp up, and it takes a lot of time to bring down the overall revolutions per minute. So today we have seen that in last 10 years time, China's the flywheel has been rotating with a very good speed, and they are trying to maintain the same speed now uh, based on their domestic consumption. But China positioned themselves a world workshop in last 1 decade. So if they don't gel with the world, then maybe there'll be the growth will be slow down. They cannot sustain 100% in the same way as they had been working with their local demand. Because unless they earn money from overseas, unless they cater to the customers, those they have been catering for the last 2 decades, unless they adopt that policy and they formulate a right strategy, it will be very difficult for them. So today, China is not exporting steel because they are consuming steel. Maybe they are showing to the world that we can consume the entire production within our country. So that is very nice. But there is a limit for the government spending anywhere in the world. When you start spending from your treasury, then it starts pinching after some time. So today, China will have to ponder upon that how do they want to position themselves in the world. So India is not affected very adversely with the situation today in China or standoff on the border. India is a democracy. India is a strong political country. India is having a strong manufacturing base in the country, and India also has all the goods and products which are required by any nation in the world. So we are self-reliant, I would say, from medicines to from warships, or from I would say food stuff to clothing. So India can survive and sustain without China. And sometimes, the policies which are a little restrictive in terms of imports, they create more growth in the country. Like, in 70s, India has a policy not to import anything and to develop everything within the country. This is the reason you see that Ambassador car, the Fiat car, they had been working and they were servicing the entire nation. It was 1981 or 82 when the Maruti Suzuki came in India. But it was only in 1972 when the Asiad were declared, then only the color TV came in the country. So, but by that time, we all were managing with the black and white TV and the refrigerators, washing machines, air conditioners, these were not being imported in the country, but the country was still managing. So, though the growth was little less, but when you have less opportunities to import, then you develop the local manufacturing base. So, I think Prime Minister has taken a very right view on this, vocal for local. I think this will definitely bring a lot of manufacturing base in India. And country changed from 1970 to 1980 versus now in 2020. So country changed. We have more technological outfits now available. We can understand better the international market. And to be very frank with you, we do not need to export anything because we ourselves is a large market. We are not a country of 2 crore, 5 crore people that we have a manufacturing base, but we want to survive in manufacturing, so we have to export. So we do not need to export anything, whether it is consumables or consumable durables or cars or motorcycles. India itself has very large demand. Yes, to maintain the balance of trade, to maintain to bridge the trade deficit, we need to export. And that's why government of India is allowing to export. But it does not mean that Chinese position today, standoff with China, will impact India adversely. Whatever politically and I would say diplomatically, the reply is to be given to China or to any other country. I think that government of India is capable enough to give. But as a business, I'm telling, if business is freely done in between China and India, then both countries they grow. And if in China and India, China comes into aggression or China thinks to tame India or to intimidate India, then it is China's mistake. India can sustain and survive without China in any field.
Okay, with this pandemic stretching, do you think that the vision of achieving 300 million tons will now be a reality, or it will also fade out?
You see, production 300 million ton is not the solution. The solution is the consumption. So consumption has to be increased. Today, our consumption is about 120 million. This consumption has to grow at least 20 million ton per year. For that, India needs to become a manufacturing base. So when India is becoming a manufacturing base, then only we can think for 300 million ton. Otherwise, we cannot think. So what we have to do, we have to grow our consumption by 20 million ton per year. And side by side, we have to see that we keep on adding the plants having capacity 20 million ton. So on year basis. So then only there will be some time lag, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years, or 2 years, because steel plants take a lot of time to install and to commission. So what we suggest to Government of India, and we would like to suggest through your channel also, that we must try to increase our consumptions. When we increase our consumption by 20 million, so next 10 years, we'll increase by 300 million total put together. 120 million now and another maybe 180 to 200 million ton in next 10 years. Then we will think side by side how to meet out this demand. Maybe for a few years, we will import some quantities, maybe 10, 15 million ton, 20 million ton a year. But in 3 years' time, these capacities will build up. For that, a major role is to be played by Government of India. So be it Indian Railway, be it roads, be it infrastructure, be it sea links, be it ports, be it water management system, large diameter waterline pipelines, and large diameter gas pipelines. So everything has to come into operation. Then only we can increase the steel consumption in the country. So 300 million ton is is neither unachievable nor it is difficult. It is achievable. It is not that difficult because we have to give impetus to the greenfield projects. Today, Government of India has given a tax rebate to the greenfield projects. So what do we need? We need at least a very holistic picture. We should need a balanced view. At least 50% we should have greenfield projects and 50% we should have brownfield projects. So the greenfield projects, they take a lot of time. So by the time if they start today, they will be commissioned by 2026 or 2027 or maybe 2028. But brownfield expansions can take place in next 3 to 4 years time. So there are 5 major steel producers today in the country. We tell them or we name them 5 million ton plus companies like Tata Steel, JSW, JSPL, Steel Authority of India, ArcelorMittal. And the near to 5 million ton is 6 companies, RINL. So all these 6 companies should be allowed to or should be facilitated to grow as brownfield projects. And if we produce about 56 million ton steel with 6 companies per year, if we increase our production by 100%, that is whatever 56 we have today, another 56 we add, then we are 112 million ton, these 6 companies. So that will give a relief to the common people, those who are going to consume steel in times to come. Similarly, more than 40 million ton steel comes from the secondary industry or the small producers. So we should try to handhold them so that people, those who produce 500,000 ton, they should produce 1 million ton. People, those who produce 200,000 ton, they should be in a club of 0.5 million ton. So they should also double their capacities. When they double their capacities, somebody will do double, somebody will do 1.5 times, somebody will do 2.5 or 3 times. So average will be 200% growth. When it is 200% growth, we can easily reach by 2028 with the existing facilities, say about 210 to 120 million ton. And balance 70, 80 million ton, we should think for the greenfield projects. We must invite the FDI, foreign direct investment in the steel industry. We should invite people from all over the world to come and to put up their steel plants in India if we want to reach to 300 million ton, which is a possible target. And I'm sure the consumption will also increase accordingly. I remember in 1990, the country's production and consumption was 13 million ton. So from 13 million ton in 30 years, we have reached to 110, 120 million ton. So of course, a long journey has been traveled, but it is not enough. So the growth is 10 times in 30 years time. So in 10 years, if we maintain the same growth, then we should have this 300 million ton easily.
Mr. Sharma ji, you mentioned about the MSME companies. Government has always been giving some special packages to them, and this year also they've announced 15,000 crores to support. But somehow the MSME companies have not been able to perform or survive in this situation. What is the real reason behind this?
MSME, very difficult business. 60 lakh MSMEs are registered in India. Out of that, hardly maybe 1 lakh or 2 lakh are, I would say, they are healthy. The problem is that there is a system problem. I think they are victim of many things. First, MSMEs are not the end user or end sellers. MSMEs are working for some major OEMs or major companies. They are the intermediate people like component manufacturers or tube and pipe manufacturers or thread and needle manufacturers. I'm just giving examples. They are attached with some major organization, or there are uh, some non-engineering companies, I would say. They are also attached with some major companies. So when they are attached with some major companies or OEM, so OEM is their customer. And these OEM people, many of them, they do not treat them well. They do not give them their dues. They do not pay them on time. I have seen some examples I have where the major OEMs, whether it is car manufacturers or automotive manufacturers or white goods appliances manufacturers, so they pay to their MSME vendors, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 vendors after 45 days. Some people may pay 30 days, some pay after 90 days, and even 120 days. So what happens? These people, MSME people, neither the banks support them, nor they have working capital to feed or to finance a major OEM. And on the other hand, they have to buy raw material on cash. So the problem is they are suffering from three different angles. One, they have to procure raw material on cash payment basis, upfront payment. Number two, bank, they do not support them the way they deserve. And number three, the major OEMs, they don't pay them on time. Then another factor is barring few tier 1 vendors, because tier 1 vendors are, especially in the automobiles, the tier 1 vendors, they have some margins available or cushion available because they are tier 1, and the production of automobile, whether it's a car company or motorcycle company, it more depends on the tier 1 vendor. So the tier 1 vendor may be treated very well by the OEMs, but a tier 1 vendor is always under cost pressures because most of the companies, they feel that we should do the value engineering, we should do the value addition. And when it comes to value engineering, people always come to the cost reduction. And when it comes to cost reduction, then immediately the pressure comes on vendors. So the tier 1 vendor will pressurize tier 2, and tier 2 vendors will pressurize tier 3. So in the total value chain, the MSME, those who are in tier 2 and tier 3, they are pressed hard. And many of them, they close their shutters. When they close their shutters, because of vacuum, somebody else comes as a professional, converted into a businessman. So he or she spends the whole life of saving into that business. And then the chain continues. And hardly people earn money. That is a big problem. So their situation has to be improved, and the responsibility of developing the vendor base depends upon the major OEMs. So major OEMs must pay them on time. Number one. Number two, they must support them whenever there is a price increase. And number three, they must see that these people, they get margins so that they can grow. So these three things are required to be done. The major OEMs must try to support their vendors, to support their MSMEs, then only this country can work. If Government of India gives 15,000 crore, 20,000 crore, it will not work. Because with 60 lakh MSMEs, I mean, it is not even a peanut, 15,000 crore. I mean, this is too low, too meager amount. But the money has to come from the business. And that can come only from the end consumer. And end consumer must pay to the MSMEs their dues. I've seen some examples that even the bigger automobile companies, they do not give increase despite of knowing that the steel prices have gone up. And they give increase after 6 months or 7 months time at a time. And that too, you know, by the time the heat is already off and the things start cooling down, then they will give whatever the demand is there from MSMEs. Suppose MSME wants 10,000 rupees per ton increase, they'll settle somewhere about 6,000. And sometimes people say not from the retrospective effect, it is from today. So ultimately, the MSME people, they suffer. So we have to start respecting MSME people. We have to consider them as part of their their business. The other big area is when MSMEs are, they are the component suppliers or equipment part suppliers. So the major OEMs, their vendor development team, when they visit to them, very surprisingly, they will put all sort of condition on them. You should have 5S, you should have Kaizen, you should have Kanban system, you should meet out our demand on just-in-demand type, you should have all the best of best systems available in the company, you should have the dresses, shoes, the goggles, hand gloves for your workers, you should have sanitization, everything. My God, this is something ridiculous. A person who has started his business in backyard of his house on a small 1000 square meter or 500 square meter of plot, and they are treating that person as a multinational company, and finally they don't pay them. That is another problem. So they will get everything done. Then they will come, they will say, you develop a product for us, and the developmental cost they will not give. They will put a carrot on their face that, look, you are going to get so much of business. So now you spend money, you bring some machines, you develop some components, parts for them, but will not pay anything. And it is not sure whether they will buy from them or they will not buy. So this is a very big agony, I would say, today. And India has to change. This is the reason India is unable to attract the vendor base in the country. Why more and more component suppliers, vendors are in Thailand? Why more and more people are in Mexico? And why more and more vendor base is in China? The reason is that because the vendors are respected by the major OEMs. The major OEMs always feel that they are the people who are behind our success. So unless we change the mindset in the country, this will not happen. So I'm not accusing any organization. But if somebody is doing what I'm telling, they must change. And the major companies in the country, major top 20 companies in the country must demonstrate to the country that we take care of our vendors. We pay them advance, not after 30 days. These people have no money. Neither bank has funded them. So they should pay them advance, so that they can go to the market, they can shop the best of the best material to produce the best of the best components for their master. I will use the word master because they are working for the master OEM. And once they are healthy, the banks will also support them because they are healthy. The last point here, the entire nation needs one electricity tariff, one nation policy. Today, the vendors, they are paying through their nose the electricity charges. If you see the total electricity bill, number of units, and divided by number of units, in many of the states in the country, it is coming from 8 rupees per unit to 20 rupees per unit. How a small vendor, small MSME can survive? If you have to pay 8 rupees, 9 rupees, 10 rupees, 12 rupees per unit, this is ridiculous. The country generates power at a price of 2 rupees or 22 rupees 20 paisa through thermal based power plant. And by the time it reaches to the end customer, it is 12 rupees. So this is injustice. So all governments, state governments, should have a policy that all of the MSMEs should get power at below 5 rupees per unit. If you can maintain that 5 rupees per unit maximum throughout the nation, then things will be resolved. Today, people are afraid of putting any electrical equipment. They are getting their work done through the manual labor. They are getting the work done through the technicians, those who can do with the less power. So this is ridiculous. They still want to use the so-called furnaces or bhatti used where the coal is used. They do not want to use the electrical furnaces because electricity is very expensive. So this is the problem. So I want to request Government of India and all the state governments. Government of India should come with a policy of one tariff one nation policy for MSMEs. Okay, for the domestic users, you are maintaining 10 rupees, 12 rupees, 8 rupees, whatever you are doing. Okay, please carry on. But anybody who takes the industrial connection, he or she should know that my power tariff will be maximum 5 rupees. And then he or she can decide what I have to do. If you see the policy in France or in Germany, they are charging less money. They are charging less money per unit from the industrial units and the commercial institutes. They are charging more money from the domestic power. So why should not we do that? So I urge the government and I say that we must have one tariff, one country policy. The small industries should not be charged more than 5 rupees per unit across India. Then only we can develop the small organization, otherwise we can never develop the
organization. Samaj, one more question. I hope you have some more time, maybe.
Yes, I have time.
These days, there is more focus on green steel. So could you tell us something about the green steel technology? Because in Germany, they are really developing this technology for worldwide use.
Yes, you're right. The green steel, it is more a fashionable word than a reality. When we speak green steel, then we have to adhere on it. Green steel means less CO2 footprint, less carbon emission, less sulfur dioxide, less dust pollution, zero liquid discharge from your company. And when you produce steel out of that, that becomes a green steel. But green steel does not mean that this will make the CO2 generation zero. You see, you produce electricity and you consume the coal from the coal to produce electricity or any other media. You can say that I am making steel out of electricity, but it is ultimately somebody is manufacturing the electricity. Similarly, today China, they are consuming, they are the largest blast furnace owners in the world. So 85% of the Chinese steel made through the blast furnaces. That means through coking coal. That means through sinter. That means through BOF shop. That means blast furnaces. So this means what? More CO2 footprint. So what is the solution? The solution is we have demonstrated in JSPL the green steel. What is that? We have done the coal gasification. So coal to syngas, synthesis gas, and synthesis gas to DRI, and DRI to electric arc furnaces. So this we already demonstrated in Angul. The steel people will have to convert into gasification business, especially India and China. Because the syngas contains 60% hydrogen and 28 to 30% CO, carbon monoxide. So when we are using 60% hydrogen and 30% CO, carbon monoxide, then only we produce, or we are on a path of making green steel. Because overall CO2 footprint reduces to 45%. So there is a saving of 55% because there is no sinter, no coke oven, no coal gas, and nothing more. So we have to convert Indian highest coal into coal gasification in synthesis gas, and then only we can, the country like India can become a country of making green steel partially. What is fully? Fully means when we will not use any fossil fuel and we will generate electricity through the solar energy or through wind energy, even not through the nuclear energy. So wind energy and solar energy, when we do tomorrow, and we convert this energy into hydrogen, and then this hydrogen is used to produce steel. I think this technology on prototype is now under development and will be in force hopefully by 2035. So next 15 years, people will continue with blast furnaces and electric arc furnaces. But partially we can make green steel where we can reduce the carbon footprint of today to 50%. That is, for a country like India, Indonesia, Australia, uh, and China, Brazil, and many more countries, those who are developing and emerging economies, they can convert their coal into gas into DRI, and DRI into steel. This is one. Second, the coal, India has third largest reserves of coal. So why are we importing crude from any other country? So we must convert coal into crude. That means coal to liquid, coal into diesel, coal into petrol, coal into benzene, coal into naphtha, coal into other hydrocarbons, including olefins, coal into power through gas, through syngas, and coal into fertilizer through syngas and through ammonia route. So this is the potential available in front of the world, that in times to come, country like India, where 350 billion ton of coal is there, and we are just struggling for coal, people feel very happy if they get the coal mines. Why is it so? Country should convert at least 50% of crude into the coal-based diesel, coal-based methanol, coal-based petrol, coal-based benzene, coal-based hydrogen, coal-based ammonia, and coal-based power through gasification route, and coal-based fertilizer. We always often say that the cost will be more or high. I mean, that is a debatable issue. We must learn from China. China is pioneer in this particular thing. Whatever the good thing China is doing, we must learn, because our geographical conditions, our mentality, people, manpower is almost same. Challenges are also same. They are 150 crore people. We are 135 crore people. If they can convert coal into gas, coal into hydrocarbons, coal into benzene, naphtha, diesel. When Sasol, South African can convert coal into diesel and coal into petrol for the last 40 years they are doing, why can't we do it? So here the problem is we have NGT, we have societal groups, we have NGOs. We always struggle. We say that coal should not be used. They're very good. Why to use coal as a coal? We must use coal as a gas, and we should reduce 50% CO2 footprint. Power is a necessity for any economy. We are just using 1,000 units per year per person, whereas America and world is using 10,000 units per year. China is using 4,000 units per year per person. We are too low consumer of electricity, and God has given us enough. God has given us enough. We must try to find out the way the others are doing, and the solution is coal to gasification.
There's one more question. Right? JSPL is planning some investment in Angul. So, in what are the areas and how much investment you are planning? What would be the capex?
You see, as I told you, it is always easier to put up a plant when already site is there. Because if you put a totally greenfield project, that means you have to acquire the land, purchase the land, you have to go for the railway line, you have to go for the water line, you have to go for the electricity line. You have to build a colony, hospital, school, many more things. So it is always easier to add plant within plant. So what we thought that we'll add another, say, 3 million or maybe 4 million ton of plant. And finally, the aim is to reach to, in Angul, to reach to 9.5, and then finally to 12 million ton as soon as possible. So reaching up to 9 million ton in Angul, we need about 12,000 crores. And to reaching up to 12 million ton, we need about 18,000 crores rupees. So we have declared a capex of 18,000 crore, and that too from our own accruals. We will not like to borrow money from banks, and this is what we are planning. So we want to add one more blast furnace, a BOF shop, and a hot strip mill, and a pelletizing plant. So this is what our ambition, and we are working on this. We are working on financials. We are working how to arrange the funds for that, and what will be the technology, who will supply the technology, and what will come from whom. So this is in working now. Maybe in 3 to 4 months time, picture will be more clear. But capex budget is 18,000 crore to reach to 12 million ton.
So thank you very much, Sharmaji, for this excellent interview, and whatever you said was really, really very valuable. And you gave an entire and clear picture of the Indian steel industry.
Thank you. Thank you. You're always welcome. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much.